Hey, welcome to today's episode of the Rox Lyfe podcast. I'm Greg, and today I'm joined by George Anderson, a wellbeing and performance coach, a speaker, and a very impressive Hyrox athlete. George has a long history of competing in sport and fitness competitions. He's got his own podcast, which is well worth checking out, called A Bit of a Boost. In this episode, George shares some of his strategies for optimizing your mindset when training for and competing in Hyrox. There's a ton of really useful tips in here, whatever level you're at. I really enjoyed speaking to him and certainly took away a lot from it, and I hope you will too. Just a quick reminder before we get into the episode, we now offer truly personalised coaching plans to help you prepare for your next race, as well as nutrition calls for anyone who appreciates that fueling your body appropriately for something like Hyrox is very important. If you want to find out more about those, head over to roxlyfe.com/coaching or roxlyfe.com/nutrition now. Okay, let's get into the show. Really hope you find it as useful and enjoyable as I did. Hey George, welcome to the show.
Hey Greg, great to see you.
Great to see you too. So on your Bit of a Boost podcast recently, you've done a bit of a mindset strategy series, which has been really good, and I felt like a lot of it would carry over well for Hyrox competitors, whatever level they're at, really. So I thought I'd get you on to talk about some of those, if that's okay. I thought we might start with the get out the chair story that you had.
Yeah, well, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed that series. In fact, it was almost not quite selfish putting those episodes together. I think like 6 of them in total, all short episodes, sort of 15-20 minutes. But I'd sort of fallen out of the habit of producing a weekly episode. And so that felt like a really nice and easy way for me to get back into doing it again. And yeah, the get out of the chair was the first one that I recorded, and it was a story that came out of one of probably my second big ultra endurance challenge, which is from a few years ago now, which was the first of 2 100-mile ultra marathons that I ran. And actually, even saying that, when an ultra runner says, unless they're like elite, when an ultra runner says, "Oh, I ran an ultra marathon," what they really mean is I walked and ran an ultra marathon, because I don't think very many people run 100 miles nonstop. So there was a lot of walking in it, which is just the strategy. It's 24 hours. It's called Endure 24 here in the UK. And you have a 5-mile lap, and you just run as many times around it as you can. I mean, you're literally running around in circles for an entire day. Pretty much the definition of madness. And I had done 10 back-to-back marathons the year before, but I'd never gone beyond a marathon. So this is my first proper ultra. And I knew that it was going to be tough. I knew that there were going to be questions that I needed to come up with some answers to. And that was kind of the point, right? That was the reason why I was doing it. There's no real, it comes to a point where you get endurance and there's no real benefit to having more and more endurance, right? Unless it's your job, like you're a special operator or something like that. And so there wasn't really any physical value or benefit, but it was what have I got? I think, again, going back to Hyrox, that's a big question that a lot of people will be asking themselves, and will be finding. I think Hyrox is particularly pleasant. There's certainly many unpleasant moments in a Hyrox event. But it's what do you learn about yourself in the process? So I knew that was a big part of what I wanted to get from doing this particular challenge, this 100-miler. And one of those moments, one of those questions came at about 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and I was about 65 miles in at that point. And to achieve my goal, I had 35 miles to go. And 35 compared to 65, it's less, but it's still 35 miles. It's still a long way, right, to run at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're tired and you've run 65 miles. So I'd made wasn't really a mistake, but I'd made the decision to sit down. I had a chair in the transition area, which you go through every 5 miles. I had food, I had water, I had changes of clothes, I had all my supplies were there, and there was this chair. And I sat down in this chair at 3 o'clock in the morning just for a bit of a rest, because I was a bit tired. And the more seconds I sat in this chair, the harder it became to then get myself back into gear, to thinking I got to get out of this chair again, because I was comfortable. It was more comfortable sitting down than it was running another 5-mile loop, and then another one for another 7 loops. And I think at that time of the day, that time of the morning, when you're that far through a 24-hour ultra, and any time of, even if you're not doing that, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, we should be asleep at that time, let's face it. And we have these circadian rhythms which just control our energy and how we feel and our motivation, regardless of what we're doing. And at that time of night, we should be asleep. So every fiber of my body was saying to me, George, look, you've done 65 miles. That's fine. I know you said you were going to do 100 and you kind of told everybody that's what you were going to do, but 65 will do. Look, your tent's over there, like 50 meters away. You got a sleeping bag. Just go get into your tent. You really don't want to do 35 more miles. It's a long way. You can't do that. And I had this kind of moment where I suddenly realized that, wow, this is the reason why I'm here. Like, these are the questions that I wanted to be asked. But I was still struggling to get my head around the fact that I had 35 miles to go. And then it was almost this light bulb moment went off, even at that time of night. And I realized that actually I didn't have to get up and run 35 miles. All I had to do was to get out of the chair, hence the name of this particular strategy. If I could get out of the chair, then I would get out of the transition area of the event. Now, if I got out of that transition area, I'd get up that first hill, which was almost immediate. And if I got up that first hill, I'd probably end up doing the first mile of the next loop. And it's only a 5-mile loop. So I knew that if I did the first mile, I'd probably do the second mile and the third and the fourth. But eventually I'd come back and I'd have done another mile. Would have done another lap. And that was the revelation to me. I didn't have to run 35 miles. All I had to do was get out of the chair, and then the rest would take care of itself. And it's a strategy that's really helped me in many other areas of my life, not just in fitness, in racing and in endurance work, but in business, in any of the goals that I've set for myself. It's that, right, what do I need to do next? That's what I've focused my attention on.
Mm-hmm. It can translate to so many other areas, like you say. But even if we're talking about Hyrox, it's just like, if you're really struggling, let's just get the next burpee done. Let's just get through the burpees. Because there's so much change within a Hyrox race. It's like, let's just get through this bit. It's like from a mental perspective, it can really help, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But take the burpees for example. What is it? 80 meters of burpee broad jumps, and you're tired by that point, of course. And you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, I've got 80 meters of burpee broad jumps to do. Oh, that's such a long way. And you actually, your energy can start to drop, your motivation can start to drop, and you start feeling a little bit demoralized by thinking about it in its entirety. And then you're thinking, oh my goodness, after doing 80 meters of burpee broad jumps, I've got to go and run another 1,000 meters. And I've got to do this. And so the get out of the chair thing says, well, I'm just going to do the next one. And I'm a big fan of, like, I'll get to a station, or if I'm training, I'll get to the next element, and I'm gassed. Really, I could do pausing a beat and taking a break, but I'll do the first few reps of that next exercise, and then I'll take a break if I need to. Rarely will I go into the next exercise or the next station in Hyrox and immediately take a rest, because I figure, well, I'm going to take a rest. I might as well, get off the mark. I might as well start, because if I start, then actually I might do 5 or 6. I might think, well, I'll just do this next length. I've only done one Hyrox event, and it was like a slalom, so kind of out and back, and I imagine it's the same at most events. And so I might get to the end of the length, and I've done that. Maybe then I'll take a break, or maybe I'll try and go unbroken. But yeah, getting out of the chair is something that absolutely is applicable there, because although they're relatively short stations in Hyrox, it's still something you've got to wrap your head around, doing 100 wall balls, doing 200 meters of walking lunges. It's a big chunk. Break it down. Just got to do the next one.
Yeah. Really liked what you said as well about, and this probably goes on to another strategy, really, is about this is why you're here. Like, it's meant to be hard. And I remember when I first started Rox Lyfe, I was like looking at a couple of articles to write, and I was looking at what like some of the most searched terms were, and one of the most popular was, how hard is Hyrox? and I remember like writing like, yeah, it's hard, but like that's the point.
That's the point.
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You don't want to turn up and like on a Saturday and pay £100 and then like come away and think, well, that was easy. It's just completely pointless. So that really like I really relate to that as well.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I read a really good quote by Matt Fitzgerald, who wrote, if you've heard of Iron War, which is a kind of a story of two legendary Ironman competitors. And I forget exactly how the quote went, but basically it's like, if you know you're going to hell, then it makes being in hell that much more manageable. Okay, so going into something like Hyrox, or a training session, let's face it, Hyrox is like the victory lap, right? The event itself. There's a lot of pain, sweat, and suffering in the lead up to that. If you're taking the preparation seriously, there is. And going into some of those sessions, like anticipating, savoring, looking forward to, embracing the suffering, then it's a lot easier to bear it, to manage it, to give meaning and purpose to it, than if you're worried about it. Oh, I hope this isn't a hard session, or this is going to be really awful, I'm not going to enjoy this. Like one of the other strategies I talk about on the last episode of this series was putting yourself in the bin, which is a beautiful term I came across by someone, I think it was in Turf Games. And what does that mean? So if you put yourself in the bin, it's like just going, absolutely leaving yourself on the mat, like nothing left. And so actually going into a session, going into Hyrox with that as the intention, like, I'm just going to put myself in the bin here. I'm just going to destroy myself. Wow, what an experience. So when that happens, it's like, yes, this is what I want. This is it. I'm getting exactly what I wanted.
Yeah. I've heard, I've read about Richie McCaw as well, the like fairly legendary All Blacks captain. Like he had a similar like thought process during a match when things were getting like really tough and like brutal. It was just like, yes, like this is why I'm here. Like, I'm being tested against the best, and it worked out pretty well for him, I've also heard Megan Jacoby, who I've interviewed. She did break the women's pro world record in Hyrox. It's since been taken from her, but I've heard it talked about on another podcast how like she was hurting from the ski onwards, effectively in that world record attempt. But like she went into it wanting to break the world record, and like no one's done that without hurting. It was like, I know this is going to hurt, and I've just got to embrace that from very, very early on, and just like suck it up. Like this is why I'm here. I know it's like a necessary thing if I'm going to achieve what I want to achieve.
Yeah, I think that does something quite fundamental to your sort of levels of energy, your motivation, and how you perceive the effort that you're putting in as well. I think a lot of beginners, not just at Hyrox, but with exercise in general. I ran a boot camp for many years, and you'd see a lot of people coming through and doing those sessions, and as a personal trainer who'd maybe didn't have much experience with exercise, say not sort of beasting themselves. Not that that's just what doing a boot camp is all about, or personal training for that matter, but those feelings of exertion, those feelings of high heart rate, high sweat rate, high breathing rate, can be quite unnerving if you're not used to it, and it can be the trigger to maybe just tone down the effort, just pull it back a little bit more. Whereas when you recognize that actually those are the signals that you maybe have another 5-10% in there, or this is hurting, but it's not going to get any worse. This is it. I just got to sustain this and this level of discomfort. I remember interviewing a world-class half marathon runner, Liz Yelling, many years ago. And one of the things she said has always stuck with me. She said that when it comes to the elites in distance running, there's probably very little that separates them in terms of their physiology, their VO2 max, their strength, their speed, and all the rest of it. But the thing that separates them is their willingness to suffer, is their ability to just sit with that discomfort, who can take the most pain and keep going. And I think that that's the same with competitors like you just described there, who are going into it knowing that, well, I'm going to get this world record, it's going to hurt, and if it's not hurting, well, I'm going to turn it up a gear until it hurts, and I know what that pain means, rather than interpreting it as something that's to be shied away from and I need to turn down because I don't like this.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about it more on a separate episode actually, but I've actually surveyed the qualifiers for the elite 15 races at the regional championships in Hyrox, and I've asked them numerous things like their 5k time, 10k times, max deadlift, all these kind of things. And there's a couple of athletes in there that they're obviously amazing at Hyrox, but some of their times aren't, to me, like crazy impressive. They're impressive, but they're not like I can't get my head around type thing.
and but they've both talked about like their mindset, their grit, they're
Yeah.
embracing the pain. Like I think they can go to places in Hyrox that other people perhaps can't go to, that sort of helps them outperform like what maybe they should be capable of, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a kind of resilience, it's a kind of mental toughness, and it's something that I think the reason I'm so passionate about this, and the reason I love and have always loved putting myself in the bin and this kind of training, has been because it just has a direct map across to so many other areas of life. Right? If you're able to tolerate discomfort and reframe the pain, then you can do that with pretty much anything that's not physical pain, that's like mental challenge, that's a difficult situation, something that's causing stress. It's like, great, here's a challenge, rather than, oh my goodness, this is causing me stress, I need to back off, or I need to manage my stress, I need to stop doing this thing because it's difficult. It has that application, and when you know that you're capable of it because you've experienced it in something like Hyrox, which, let's face it, is quite well, there's a good boundary around it, isn't there? There's it's like it's going to stop at some point after an hour and 10, however long it takes you to do it. It's going to stop, and you'll recover. And even if you don't finish it, there's no real life consequences unless you're it's your job. So it has those boundaries, but you still get to experience it. You still get to learn something about yourself. You still get to develop your own grit, your own determination, your own, like, take yourself to places that you didn't even know you're able to go to. I think that's the other great thing about Hyrox. It allows people to do that. It allows people to really push themselves into zones, into places that they didn't think, not just they didn't know they were capable of, they didn't know existed. And it's like, wow, like no matter what time you come out with at the end, like whatever level of competitor you're at, whether you're doing it in pairs, as a team, in individuals, whatever level, if you put everything into it and you overcome yourself and you get to the end, it's like, that's big. That's something you can use. And it really helps to maybe even redefine your own story, your own sense of identity, who you are, what you're potentially capable of as well. I think that's what's most exciting about all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, another one of your strategies, you've talked about no repping yourself, which I think is really relevant in Hyrox. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh my goodness! So I've only done Hyrox once, which was as a pair, and we did okay in the event. We did about 61 minutes, and we've got through, qualified to the world champs. So we're really pleased with that. But we could have been about a minute quicker had I not had so many no reps in the wall balls at the end. And it was the most frustrating thing. I thought I was on like 25 when I handed over. I was on 9, right? And I just wasn't getting the depth, and I couldn't hear. So the judge, and she was doing a great job, but I just didn't know what I was doing, and this idea of kind of no repping yourself is something that I tried to do, like, throughout my training career, throughout everything that I do. It's like, if I've got press ups and the press up is chest to floor, and I do a rep that's not chest to floor, I'm not counting that rep. If I'm doing pull ups and I've got to get my chin over the bar, and I don't quite get my chin over the bar, I will do another rep. Like, nobody's going to call me up on it. No one's going to tell me, oh, hang on, that wasn't a full rep. I'm training by myself, but I will still no rep myself. And I think that's, for me anyway, doing things correctly, not cutting corners in training. It gives you the discipline to make sure that you're doing it in a race situation, and also obviously getting the most out of your training. So that's why it's so frustrating to be getting these actual no reps in Hyrox. I mean, I have been training on that wall ball like you wouldn't believe. Since then, I will not be no repped again. And I've been training with a 10 kilo ball as well to make sure that I'm overtraining with it. But it is frustrating when you get that, and I think you reduce the chances of it happening if you're really strict with yourself in everything that you do. But also, I think there's a kind of a psychology behind it as well. Being able to say, like, I know nobody cares. Nobody's gonna, it's not gonna not qualify me for something because I'm by myself. I'm just training. So to be able to say to yourself, no, hang on, come on, let's do this properly. Do that again. I was on the treadmill doing a session yesterday with kilometer repeats, and I let the treadmill take over, and I think it was on 1 or 3.3 kilometers or something when I started it again, and it was, I was gassed by the end. It was with sled push, sled pulls. It was basically the first 40% of Hyrox, 50%, and And I was getting to the end of like the next kilometer from 3 to 4 kilometers, and it's like I know this started at 3.3. Come on, George. Like I really wanted to finish at 4.0, but I made myself do those last 30 meters because it's like, going beyond, going through the line, doing that extra little bit when you don't have to. I think if you're able to do that, if you're able to control yourself and not just be dictated by some numbers or think you're getting away with it, I think there's something quite powerful as a mindset strategy in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Since I heard you talk about it, I've been like no repping myself as well on the wall balls. I must admit in training. Not that like my depth, I always think is fine, but like you don't always bang hit the target. And I think it probably, the reality is like if it gets to competition and you get a judge that's no repping you like repeatedly, I think like you're better prepared mentally to cope with that if you've been doing it yourself in training as well.
So you said you've seen people really sort of falling apart at the wall balls when they've been given some no reps. I haven't got as much experience of doing it as you, but I can see how that would happen. I can see how frustrating it could be to like lose your rag at that point there, and you're so close to the end yet so far as well, because 100 wall balls is a lot. That's like 3, 4, 5, 6+ minutes to knock them out. And you can see that time ticking away. You can see your target time just coming and going. And so again, that keeping that motivation, that energy right up to the end, that's the edge, right? That's the edge. That's the thing that's going to, it's not about the physical ability you have and the training you've done. It's the mindset that you've carved out during the process of being strict with yourself. I think that has such important application there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think quite a nice follow on from that is your through the line strategy. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, well, that's something that came when I was at university. I was at Loughborough and I was a 400-meter runner, and we do a lot of repeats, like 300-meter repeats, and 400-meter training, by the way, is brutal. I'd rather run 100 miles than run a 400 meters. It's horrible. But you do these repeats, and I remember one of the coaches at the time would always be very keen to impress upon the fact that it's important to run through the line, because if you're racing and you start slowing down 5-10 meters before you cross the line, which many people do. In fact, you can watch competitions like Olympics, World Championships, and people will be slowing down before the line. Well, there's the line, I can slow down now, and they're getting beaten on the line because someone's coming up from behind them. So we're always told that you got this idea, that's not the finish line. The finish line is 5-10 meters further on. So you always go through the line. If you're doing a 60-second repeat or interval in whatever it is, you run for 60 seconds. You don't run for 58 seconds and then slow down. If you're on the bike, it's very easy to do that, right? You're spinning your legs and just like, okay, I can ease off now. And then I can get off the bike at 60 seconds. No, you go right the way through the line and then you finish there. So it's more for the kind of the cardio, I guess, or the endurance bits rather than the strength and the weights, but it has application there as well. If you imagine doing, again, the wall balls, you might sort of tail off a little bit towards the end and be a little bit less strict with your depth, or thinking, well, I'm at the end now. But certainly for running, for rowing, for skiing, for anything where there's an end point, whether you've defined it or somebody else has defined it, always think about going beyond that point, going through the line, so you don't lose that last little bit of performance, which could make it or break it. But also, again, it's that self-discipline, I think, that comes through with that.
Yeah, I had three sets of 80-meter weighted lunges yesterday in the gym, and it felt like every time I was just short of the line, like with a lunge, and it's like, oh, I've got to do one more to cross that line.
Yeah, I know. And you make yourself do it, right? I was the same. I was doing these walking lunges yesterday. I was thinking, right, I'm going to do these 200 meters. I'm going to go unbroken with a 20-kilo bag, and I kind of made it, but like the length I was doing it, I had to go 13 meters one way and 12 meters back to make the 25 and do 4 of them, and sort of 8 of them, sorry. And it was one way back, like the 12 meters, I was probably each time 6 inches short of the line, right? And you gotta do another lunge, right?
Yeah.
You do another lunge. You don't just step over the line, you go through the line. So yeah, absolutely, that's where that has its real utility. And as I said, there's 2 elements, 2 layers to that. First of all, you've got there's the obviously more physical training, right? You're pushing yourself when those muscles are tired and you're aching and tired as well. But then you have got that self-discipline as well, just to push through, just to keep going, to I will do one more. No one cares, right? No one's going to pull you up on it if you don't do that. If you stop 6 inches short, it's only you. You're the only person who knows whether you did or did not do that. And I think there's something really beautiful about that as well. It's that battle you have with yourself that nobody else gives a monkeys about.
Yeah. And that, I guess, like post-workout, I know you've talked about the like overcome and become, is it? Where you sort of essentially review what you've done during the workout.
Yeah, it's kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier on, where if you've had one of those sessions, or there's been a part of a session where you've really had to overcome your own resistance, like maybe those voices have been cropping up saying, "God, this is really hard, just slow down a little bit," or maybe just do 2 rounds, don't do the third. Like, you've got a whole day of work to do, you don't want to knack yourself out, so just do the 2. And you've kind of overcome that, and you've done the 3rd set, or you've pushed a little harder, you haven't slowed down when you've really wanted to. I think after the session, I mean, great that that's happened in the session itself, but afterwards, reflecting on that and really savoring what you've done, what you've achieved there. It doesn't matter, again, this is the whole overcome and become. It doesn't matter what level you're at. It doesn't matter how fast you were going, how many rounds you've done, or how often you're training, or any of those things. What matters is that you reached or were close to your limits, and you were able to overcome those limits. And they were perceived limits, obviously, because you were able to overcome them. But you pushed beyond, you overcame. And in the process of doing that, if you really acknowledge what you've done there, then you become the kind of person who's able to do that. And I think there's something really powerful here with creating this self-identity as somebody who's capable of doing this. Because guess what? You're going to find that happens again and again and again. You're going to have more situations in the future where you want to quit, you want to stop, you want to slow down, you want to, not do that last round. And if you're the kind of person, because you've overcome and become, you're the kind of person who always finishes it, who can go through those difficult inner voice conversations. If you're that kind of person, because that's how you see yourself, you're far more likely to then do it again and again and again. Whereas the opposite is also true. If you see yourself as the kind of person who always quits, who's got a kind of a track record of, oh, I can't believe I'm never able to do this, I'm never able to finish a workout. If that's what happens to me, sometimes we can't, right? Sometimes we have to make modifications to whatever workout it is that we've set for ourselves. And that's fine. But if you then tell yourself those stories that you're incapable, you can't overcome, you can't do this, you can't do that, then that's the story that's going to come to the top of your mind in those situations in the future. So it does work both ways. So that's that time after the session doesn't have to be, in meditation or journaling or anything like that, though I love both of those things. But it's just spending some time reflecting, maybe on the drive home or in the shower later on, about, I did do that. I did overcome that. And that is the kind of person that I am, or that I am becoming. There is huge power in that, in both our mindset, our identity, and our physical performance as well.
Love it. Can we talk? I'm interested to get your perspective on like pre-race nerves, anxiety. I know a lot of people suffer with that, whatever level they're at, really, in Hyrox or any sport. It can be a bit of a, like, you walk into the room, it's a bit of an assault on the senses to some extent. It's loud. It's so much going on. How do you think about that? What would you tell someone that suffers a lot with that?
Well, I think first of all, just reminding yourself, why you're there. And I think we can get very caught up in the atmosphere. You walk around a place like that, I'm in reasonably good shape. Like, it can be an intimidating environment to be in, right? A lot of dudes walking around with their tops off, looking absolutely Adonis-like stacked. A lot of really kind of fit women, and it's just like, if you have a tendency towards feeling inadequate, don't do Hyrox, right? But actually, you can combat a lot of that by just keeping in mind why you're there. I think what Hyrox has done very well is it's created that sense of community. And, even given what I've just said about the kinds of people who will go along and will do that, there is no judgment. There is no sense of us and them. There's no elitism. There's no cliques. It's all just encouraging each other to challenge each other to be better than they were yesterday, to celebrate fitness, to celebrate being able to overcome, to set goals, to defeat goals, to work towards goals. That's the real vibe when you're in that room, despite the bonkers atmosphere. And again, I've only been to one of these events so far, but it was a tremendous experience. I think if you're kind of finding that you're getting a little nervous leading up to it, just reminding yourself as to why you're doing it, what's important, what's most important for you, and actually what's riding on it, which is usually not very much unless you are competing and looking at getting to the top. You may have some goals around your times that you want to achieve, and actually that's all you can control is your performance in that moment. You can't control what somebody else is doing. You can't control, like we came 5th when we did it as a pair, and that was dependent on us coming 5th, was dependent on there being no more than 4 pairs who were better than us turning up on the day, right? I'm sure there are more than 4 pairs out there who could have been there on the day, who would have beaten us, and we wouldn't have qualified, right? But that's just the way it landed. I couldn't control who else is going to turn up on the day, but I can control how I perform. And I think just giving yourself that sense of centeredness and groundedness to say, well, look, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to have this experience. I know myself. I know how I'm going to race. I've got, and maybe this is a tip as well, to have a plan as to what kind of pace you're going to take that first kilometer, right? Because it's very easy, not just in Hyrox, but in anything. I've been a runner and ran runners for decades. Really common for even experienced runners to go out for the first mile at a 10K, half marathon, a marathon even, and absolutely smash a super fast time and then pay the price. Yeah, we may get a little bit of a lift in our performance on a race day compared to the training, but not that much, right? No more than a few percentage points. And if we really take off for that first kilometer, feels good, but you're going to pay the price for that. So have a strategy, know what kind of pace you want to go out at for the first K, know how you're going to attack that ski erg. If you're doing it as a pair, then have those tactics nailed down. You've got to have flexibility, but I think starting off with a plan is also a real settler, because then, like the get out the chair thing, that's all you have to do. You just got to get started, because once you're into it, you'll be fine. You'll get around. You'll get to the end. But yeah, maybe having rituals. Some people like to have a ritual. Some people don't. Some people just enjoy the atmosphere and be bouncing around. They're probably not the kind of people who are struggling with nerves and anxiety, or maybe they are and they're just showing it in a different way. It's almost like if you think about Michael Phelps versus Usain Bolt, they're very, very polar opposites in terms of their preparation and rituals leading into a big event. Bolt will be playing with the crowd, he's jumping around, he looks anything but kind of focused on just himself. Michael Phelps is there with his headphones on, he's listening to music, he's in the zone, he's visualizing the race and all the rest of it. So there's no one size fits all answer for elite performance or for top performance. You got to do what you feel works right for you. Find something that gives you comfort and that makes you feel like you've got the right level of nerves and anxiety. Recognize that that's a good thing. You want to be amped up, you want to have that adrenaline, you want to have that energy, but just not too much, so that it actually starts to diminish your performance.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, all right. Well, thank you for this. It's been brilliant. When's your next race?
Well, I'm entered for we've got the World Champs, which are in May, and before that, I've entered as a solo. In fact, as I was driving back from Birmingham, having done Hyrox in November or October, I think it was, driving back, I was like, oh yeah, this is me. I found my race. So I entered there and then for the Open, the singles in London. So that's the next one, although I am on the waiting list for a couple of others as well. So we shall see. But in the meantime, lots and lots of training and full depth wall balls are in my future.
All right, brilliant. If people want to find out more about you, listen to you, where should they go?
Well, yeah, the podcast, A Bit of a Boost. We talk about all kinds of things around energy, motivation, mindset, well-being. So there's some good interviews on there as well with some other great guests, including yourself, which will be coming up soon. And my website, bygeorgeanderson.com. There's a few bits on there as well. I'm a speaker. I work with teams and organizations. I'm a coach. So I do a number of different things. And LinkedIn and the website are probably the two most accessible resources for most people who wanted to find out more.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. I think it will help a lot of people. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.